Last week, on the 25th of July, one man resigned and more than half our country celebrated. Fair enough, it's been a long 2.5 months since the NEET paper leaked and the exam got cancelled. People were and are angry and they have earned the right to be. But a resignation is a neat, tidy ending. And this story is anything but neat. 30 lakh rupees changed hands for that paper. And there's a side of that transaction that almost nobody in this conversation has looked at. There's also a cost to this whole mess that isn't measured in headlines or resignations. And it's landing on families who had the least room to absorb it. And the Cockroach Janata Party movement just proved that a government will listen if you push hard enough. Which means that someone somewhere is probably already taking notes for the next time. A resignation doesn't answer any of that. It was never going to. So today, I'm not celebrating. I'm asking the 5 questions that resignation left completely untouched. And at least one of them, I think, is going to make you uncomfortable, no matter who you are or what you already believe about all this. Let's go through them one at a time. Investigators say that about a week before the exam, 2 men bought a leaked NEET paper this year for 30 lakh rupees from a doctor in Gurugram. From there, it travelled through a coaching hub in Rajasthan and out to students across several states, moving through WhatsApp and Telegram groups. Now think about that number for a second. 30 lakh rupees is not what 2 men spend just to help each other pass an exam. That's not a personal purchase. That's more like a wholesale buy. It only makes sense if you're confident that there's a market on the other end. Families, one after another, each willing to pay for a copy. Here's the part almost nobody is talking about. A leaked paper is worth exactly nothing if no one, anywhere, is willing to pay for it. We've built this entire national conversation around punishing the people who leaked it. But we've asked almost nothing about the demand that made a 30 lakh rupee bet look like a safe one in the first place. And here's a harder version of that same question. The law itself doesn't only punish the leak. Under the Anti-Cheating Act passed in 2024, a student who knowingly uses a leaked paper can face up to 5 years in prison and a fine of 10 lakh rupees. The same law that goes after those who leaked the paper. It's not just theory either. Last year alone, over 250 NEET candidates faced action for unfair means, and 14 had their MBBS admissions cancelled. The law is telling us something we don't say out loud in the public conversation, that buying an answer and using one are not innocent acts. They're part of the same chain as leaking a paper. So why does our outrage stop at the leak? The people who bought this paper, the students who knowingly attempted that exam with someone else's stolen answers in their hands, they made the same bet that the leaker did. That they're harder to be angry at doesn't make them any less responsible. It just makes it more comfortable for us to ignore them. Here's what the data shows. And I want you to observe the pattern, not just the number. 93 NEET-linked student suicides have been documented between 2021 and 2026. Quota alone accounts for close to 40 of them. And the number has climbed almost every year. 4 in 2021, 9 in 2022, 14 in 2023, 19 in 2024, 32 in 2025, and 14 already this year so far. Several of them in the days right after the NEET exam was cancelled. And here's the part I want to be honest about, because I looked into it and the answer is worse than a suspicion. These deaths are not spread evenly across income levels. Take Pradeep in Sikar, Rajasthan. His father was a labourer. Pradeep had spent close to 3 years living in a rented room, preparing for this exam. His family used to send him milk and buttermilk on the bus because that's what they had to send. Days after this year's leak and cancellation, he took his own life. Or take Akanksha Chaturvedi, 17 years old. She prepared in Nagpur while her family stayed in a small village in Madhya Pradesh. Her father farmed a small plot of land and worked as a cook on the side just to pay for her coaching. The family had taken a loan of around 3 lakh rupees against a Kisan credit card. In the note she left, she apologized to her parents, saying that she felt she had ruined everything for both of them. These aren't stories I dug up to make a point. They're part of a documented pattern. Families with real limits, borrowing against land, against next year's harvest, to give one child a shot at one exam. When that exam becomes uncertain or gets cancelled, the weight that child carries isn't just disappointment. It's the knowledge of what has already been spent on them with nothing to show for it. We've asked plenty about what this costs the government's credibility, but we haven't asked what it costs a farmer who now owes 3 lakh rupees because he was trying to finance a child's shot at pulling the family out of poverty. This is the question that I think matters most. It's also the hardest one to say out loud because it points at parenting and at culture. None of these children were likely ever told in so many words that their life would end if they didn't clear this exam. That's not how this pressure works. It works quietly, over years, a slow narrowing of what counts as an acceptable future. Becoming a doctor stops being just one respectable option among many. It becomes often the only one that makes years of a family's sacrifice worth something. The one announced proudly at a wedding. The one whose absence has to be explained away to relatives who ask. By the time a child sits for an exam like this, they've often spent 3 or 4 years without a single rehearsed alternative. Nobody sat them down and built a real, respected version of their life without medicine. Because saying that out loud can feel to a parent like giving up on their own child too soon. So when the exam gets compromised by someone else's corruption, that student isn't just losing a test result. They're watching the only future they were ever given permission to imagine disappear with no map for anything else. That's not fragility. That's the predictable outcome of narrowing a child's entire identity down to a single number for years without ever practicing what happens if they aren't able to achieve that rank. I don't think most of these parents are cruel. I think most genuinely believe that they're protecting their child by pushing them this hard. And that's what makes this so difficult to say. There's no villain here, just a culture repeated in millions of homes that has quietly agreed that a child's worth can be measured in a rank. We have spent weeks demanding accountability from a minister and from the government. But a movement built on demanding accountability doesn't get to skip that same question about itself. At the height of the protests, while police were reportedly using tear gas and lathi charges on demonstrators, the movement's own spokesperson was filmed eating a burger at a mall nearby. He was removed within a day, and the movement itself called this unacceptable. That fast response says something good about this movement, but it also shows a real gap between the people who built a movement's voice and the people who absorb its cost. And now, the bigger question, the one that outlasts this news cycle. Abhijit Dibke, the man behind this movement, has said clearly and repeatedly that he has no interest in electoral politics, that citizens shouldn't need to contest elections just to demand their rights. And I want to take him at his word. But here's the detail that makes me want to watch closely rather than just believe it. Dibke used to work with the Aam Aadmi Party not so long ago. Anna Hazare's anti-corruption movement had made the exact same promise over a decade ago, that the movement was about citizens holding power accountable and not about becoming power itself. It drew the same kind of energy that this movement is drawing right now. Then a faction from inside that movement decided that elections were the only way to make the change last. Hazare didn't go with them. He stayed out and watched the movement he'd built become something he no longer led. I'm not saying that Dibke is lying. What I am saying is that we have no political aspirations is what every movement says. right up until a faction inside it decides otherwise. It doesn't have to be the founder who makes that call. That's exactly how it happened with the Aam Aadmi Party. Last question, and it's about what happens after this specific story is over. A minister's resignation was won this time through weeks of mass mobilization and by multiple accounts, real violence on the streets. That's a real outcome for a serious grievance, but it also shows something else. The ordinary channels, parliamentary questions, court cases, years of reporting that came before any of this couldn't produce this outcome on their own. It took thousands of people on the road to do what those channels couldn't. That's worth sitting with. Not because the streets shouldn't have worked, but because of the lesson it teaches everyone watching. The takeaway here isn't only that the exam system failed and got fixed. It's also that a government can be made to bend through a big enough, disruptive enough mobilization. And that lesson doesn't stay reserved for causes as serious as this one. It becomes available to the next movement and the one after that, regardless of how legitimate or serious their grievance actually is. Whether this turns out to be democracy correcting itself or democracy setting a precedent that gets misused later will depend entirely on what happens next, whether real structural reform follows or whether this ends with one man's job and nothing else. I asked you 5 questions today that we as citizens of this country must ask ourselves. A minister resigning answers none of them. It was never going to. These are questions that people either aren't thinking about enough or that are simply getting drowned out in the noise of these protests. One more thing before I close. We can change a minister. We just did last week. We could even change the whole government someday. But none of that changes the actual reason why this happened. Somewhere out there, there are people for whom buying a stolen exam paper is a smart bet. Not wrong to them, just smart. A good use of money. So here's the real question. How do we change who these people fundamentally are? And how do we change what they get out of doing this? Because until one of those two things changes, ministers can keep resigning, one after another, but the next leak is already waiting to happen. If you want more videos like this, ones that ask the uncomfortable questions, please consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you.